there.
Well, it's only a very small part of the lesson. You don't need to see
That's
the whole
right.
thing.
So we might want to know what else she's doing in other parts of the lesson and how does she have the students take more responsibility. Because we haven't got a lot of student participation there. At least a couple said something and one wrote on the board, but I could have been sleeping in another corner very easily, as indeed I probably did in some lessons myself. So that's, and then it links into the science curriculum. And there's a bit of detail about school context, not a lot, just the map. So that's all. Any more questions about the school part? It might be enough for you actually, or I could take you through higher education if anybody's interested.
I'm interested.
Are you?
Yes. I work in higher education.
Okay. So higher education?
Well, is anybody else interested, or is it just
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Yes, right, okay.
Okay, what's happening in universities? I'll skim through. The oh, that's right. There's an education revolution in universities too. Not only in our universities, in yours as well. One part of it was the Our Excellence in Research exercise, which you're going into a new version of, and you've got excellence in the title of it too. So that's the report. There seemed to me be, so this report came out last year in January. So I think they collected the data from across a 5-year period. And the data was, well, first of all, they ranked all the journals in education, in every field. But in education, we were called Field of Research 13. And inside Field of Research 13, there were 4 subcategories. They ranked all the journals, A star, A, B, C. And they, we were pretty well directed. Don't publish in the C journal. Don't ever think of that. Go for the A star journals, even though there were hardly any in education, and they might not be the ones that you were interested in or where your community was. When you write in an academic journal, and when you read an academic journal too, you want it. Each one has its own very particular community. There are conversations going in that space, going on in that space that you're joining. You don't just randomly pick a journal because somebody has rated it as A star, and anyway, that's the sort of thing that changed. So it was how many, retrospectively, they rated all of us. In Australia, it was everybody who was a employed, research active scholar at university had to be put in. So if you were technically research active but you hadn't been very productive, that didn't go down well. If you had done a lot of conference papers but not published anything from them, they didn't count suddenly and they had to fall. Anyway, education did so badly as a whole. I mean, we were, first of all, I was shocked. I looked at ours first, and sadly, in curriculum and pedagogy, and the ratings across, so journals were ranked, fields of research were ranked, and each university was ranked inside the field of research. So at UWS, which is the largest teacher training institution in New South Wales, which is the largest state, we had, so the ratings, five levels for the field of the middle one was world class. And Ian Stronach made a great joke about how can you have 2 steps above world class and well above world class. Is that like galactic? It's a nonsense, he said. The Australian process of the ERA was a nonsense. Then 2 was below world standard, and 1 was well below world standard. And sadly, the area curriculum and pedagogy, which is pretty fundamental to teacher education, you'd think, we ranked a 1, well below world standard. We couldn't understand it because we had two of the editors of the English Teachers Journal were the lead and an A-rated journal in the country. And my boss, Wayne Sawyer, was very prolific and very well known in English education. We had other good people. Anyway, it was just a mess. And then we started looking across education. And it looked pretty terrible everywhere. Not necessarily as bad as us. But it was so terrible. Oh yes, he called Stronach called ours eccentric. And the Minister for Higher Education, Kim Carr, singled out education and applied economics in his public statement about how disappointing the results had been in those areas. And then, of course, the Australian Education Research Association crunched the numbers and looked at, compared across all the sectors. We also how much funding you got, tweaked where you lay in the ERA, and it was amazing. This report, it's huge, it's hundreds of pages long, and all it is numbers, and it's all tables. There is no interpretation of it. So, like the My School website, I think there are stories to be told in it and through it, and finding a way to tell those stories is an interesting thing to do. But AARE, the Education Research Association, did an analysis and claimed that education had been multiply shortchanged. There was a statistically lower chance of scoring highly in FOR 13 out of the 20 or 22 fields of research codes than any other field of research. In terms of research income, we scored, although we produced around 5% across around 20 fields, that's about right, of the research output in the country, we got less than 1% of the research funding. And we had lower percentages of highly ranked journals available than in any other field of research. So, for example, a colleague of mine who's a music educator, all the journals that she publishes in that are her people, her community, are B's or C's. So what does she do? Stop publishing in them and go for somewhere where there isn't a music education conversation going on? It's ludicrous. And they also, yes, so there were many other ways. Oh, we also had, coincidentally, higher staff-student ratios in teaching than any other field of research, which must impact on your outcomes. Anyway, so they stressed an overwhelmingly uneven playing field for educational researchers. So how to intervene in this? I thought, my God, here's a paper I haven't written, but I did start writing narratives. So what we were told, we were specifically told to publish in more A and A star journals. And avoid C's and referee conference proceedings, and try to turn every conference paper into a journal publication, which is good practice anyway. So can you see that lovely beach photograph there? That's Coogee Beach in Sydney, a long way away from the University of Western Sydney, where we spent, I think we must have spent about $15,000 in 1 week, putting up about 16 of us, I can't remember, I might have a number in there, in a hotel at Coogee Beach to make us write. Now, that's not a problem for me, and it was good for me because that's where I wrote the first draft of the My School Redux paper, just before we went there. So I had this is an imagined paper I haven't written, that would be called Constituting the Very Best in an Educational ERA, Disciplinary Metrics and Educational Research. I've written about 3,500 words of it and then I left it. So I wanted to bring narrative into it, so here it is. Here's a narrative. We're in a room right by the water, 22 of us. There's no view, which is absolutely, they brought us here, then they locked us in. There's no view, and we're squashed 5 to 6 to a table with our 4 long days together, partitioned into blocks of silent writing time. Discussions led by a facilitator from our student learning unit, and peer feedback sessions. We sit elbow to elbow, tappity-tappity-tap on our keyboards. We can't log into Wi-Fi easily. In fact, they weren't going to give us the password because that would distract us from writing. It's like being in grade 5, really, in some ways. But we're encouraged to stay in the silent writing zone and to get our word counts up. And indeed, we had to announce how many words we'd done each day. And then there were prizes. The cost is about $1,000 each for those of us who live in for these 4 days, around $15,000 altogether, excluding facilitator fees, for what seems to be an indulgence, considering that each of us has all the necessary equipment for writing, time, space, computer, reference materials, silence in our usual workspaces or homes. But the goal is to increase publications, explicitly those that can be submitted to ANA Star journals. I have to say too, given they spent this much money here, and then a month or 2 later, when we were into the new year, 2012, no, sorry, yes, that was actually a year later, but anyway, we had no conference funding at all this year. So they're spending money like this then a year ago, and then this year, no conference money to go anywhere, you've got to cover it yourself. Perennial debates like the "I'm a teacher, not a researcher" arise from time to time. So we certainly had a lot of that talk. And spirited discussions of the skewing of the journal rankings, but ultimately we comply and we call our word counts out at the end of the last day. We discuss productivity tools like the website Write or Die. Has anyone seen that one? And it's interesting. And we vie for little prizes for volumes of words or sexiest titles. On the 3rd day of the retreat, the first report, that one that was in the previous picture, is launched by the Minister, and I stay up till midnight scrolling through 398 pages of tables, searching for my institution and my discipline. The grid lines of columns and rows resist my futile attempts to find myself inside them, and they continue to flicker through my dreams, as they still do. Although the report provides no narrative behind the tables themselves, the media and the university begin spinning stories from them the next morning. Our Prime Minister, our Vice Chancellor, she's not the Prime Minister, sent out a congratulatory report to the whole academic staff about how well we had done in cultural studies. No mention of all our shameful. Anyway, so, you know, if I wrote that paper, that's part of the way I interrupt the discourse. Another one, now because my school is so fantastic at giving parents who have the wherewithal choice in where to send their students, i.e. to elect private schools if they have the money and they have one in the vicinity, they thought they would also have at my university. I don't know if you have something like this. It was launched in May this year, and we don't really know what it will do yet, but the rhetoric is, of course, around choice. So it's a searchable, so student choice now, how to choose the university, the best university to go to. It's a searchable comparative database with statistics on student satisfaction that they gather through those last tutorial of the unit. Sure you have them here, SFUs, SFTs, we call them. Do you have those little tick box surveys? Yes.
Yeah, well, they're done online. Yeah.
Oh, no, ours are hard copy. And you have to hand the package over to a student, show the transparency. So far we still have overhead transparency machines, projectors, and you have to, with the instructions, and you have to exit the room so that you don't impact on the results. Sorry, you don't have to follow me around the room. And the student has to gather them all up and put them in the envelope and sign over the seal so that the instructor can't interfere with the surveys. Because
I trust them.
We would. So
I think that might be how some of the national Because, you know, we have the National Student Survey here, which at
Right.
the moment is only undergraduates. I think that is
How that's done.
some of that might be done. Yeah.
Okay, well, every single unit in every single class in every single semester in the last week, they just fill in the surveys. So we have students just stop coming. Said, oh, I don't want to fill one of these in again, it's just a waste of time. Okay, anyway, but that's amongst the data that they've used. Staff-student ratios, staff qualifications, what percentage of full-time academic staff have master's degrees versus PhDs, and so on. And you can compare up to 3 universities. And of course, what we did then was quickly look up where we, much as we want to critique these things, we want to locate ourselves within them too. That's the trouble with neoliberal technologies, they get in your blood. Okay, so when we looked at our competitors, because of course we're in a market, we seemed to have, according to the reading of our research professor of the data, we seem to have the second highest staff-student ratio in teacher education across the whole country. The second highest in the country. But in primary and secondary teacher education, we had the 4th highest student satisfaction rates in the whole country. And we had the highest score in the whole country on the good teaching scale. So, of course, we're caught in this bind where, on the one hand, you want to say, but let's critique how that was done, and on the other hand, we want to say, oh, that's not too bad. And then there's a third reading of it, which is, oh my God, the university is going to see us as a really efficient unit, and they're going to increase, possibly maintain us at this level of high stress, high student staff ratio, or roll it out to other faculties in the university because we're held up as a model of efficiency. So there are all those ways to read it. If you go to the My University website, you can also, there's a postgraduate section for potential research students. And I've just pulled down, so what they've done there is they've just uploaded the page from the ERA report, and you can look up here where you want to go. So let's say you live in Penrith, 5 minutes from our campus, where we have really good people, I think. And you look up UWS, and it's all colour-coded, of course, for you. You can see these, they're right down the bottom here. Somewhere, I think we're about this line here. We've got, this is the one. The ones and twos, I think were, oh, this isn't a smart board, is it? Yes. So, anyway, if I was a doctoral student and I looked at that, I would take fright and I would go somewhere else, regardless of the particular individual professors and what they might offer you, what particular expertise they have. Then why wouldn't you go to the places that have the dark blues, which coincidentally happen to be the best funded sandstone universities? So yes, so the disciplinary results from the ERA exercise are there for them with none of the contextual detail or any idea that perhaps you might have a supervisor who's interested in your topic or your method. And so on. It also lists on that page, on another page here, how many scholarships there are were awarded. So of course I would go to the one that looked like it gave out the most scholarships. So just to go back to, oh that's right, and we've also got, because it's all about neoliberal policy, is about focusing on the numbers and what can be compared, we also have this new thing inside our university, but anyone outside can look at it. We have the researchers portal that they created a couple of years ago, that this is one of my pages. So I can look at, it's meant to be, I think the language they used was to help us, it would be transparent. Transparency is one of those mantras that would help us to look at our own profiles. So mine tells me I'm not getting enough research money, but I'm good at publishing. But it meant that, of course, people didn't look at their own. It was entirely searchable, and people looked at everybody else in their departments across the university. So it contributed to, I think, a much more competitive way of looking at our colleagues. And what's amazing about it, just one thing, I thought until last week, I thought initially they told us it was only available inside the university and on campus, but actually it's available anywhere to anyone. It's entirely searchable.